All right, truck camper build 9.0. Let's talk about, we're at another little milestone here. What you guys are looking at is the Cabover. Now what I've done in the last couple builds is I actually made the Cabovers as a modular component. What I mean by that is I built them separately, and then I will, in this video you guys will see, I'll actually carry it over and mount it into the camper. Now, some of my earlier campers, or maybe the first half or so, I don't remember exactly when I did the transition, I would actually kind of just like I built the frame of this, I would build the Cabover, in place into the camper, which is fine too. Nothing's wrong with it in terms of structural sense, but it's just easier, I found, to make it modular, especially Cabovers that are smaller. So this one is only the functional, how much it'll actually stick out is just a little over 30 inches. Of course, it's 75 inches, or they're pretty close to side, that closes up the width. Just like 8.0, this Cabover is not intended to be one that you're going to sleep in and lay on top of. This is just going to be storage. So this is a pretty small Cabover. However, this modular concept, you could, of course, expand it to a bigger one. Now, what I did on this one is actually sandwiched on both sides with the plywood. If you guys recall from 8.0, I was using cedar planks, so a different skinning material, but I just put the planks on the bottom, and I left the inside portion, which again will be storage, just open. I put some thin slit in between the framing, and that's fine. It works fine. It's a way to cut a little bit of weight. But for this one, and just kind of experience working with 8.0, I wanted a smooth surface for storage as far as putting stuff in there, or at least I wanted to try it. So that's what this is here. Of course, double siding this adds some weight, but it does add some strength. Frankly, that strength that's added is kind of unnecessary, but never hurts anything. So how did I make this? So this has a cedar frame, and it's really easy to conceptualize how I did this. So this angle here, okay, so this starts here, angles here, goes all the way over to the other side and mirrors. I made it in the exact same way that I made these. Now, I did cut this out because that fits this part here. In the Cabover, I just left this across, and I actually even cut 2 triangle pieces, so this is fully enclosed. I cut off, so this column here is represented by this. Of course, this is stubby because I cut it off to the length I needed. But essentially, it's made exactly like this. So it has a little column piece, has the angled piece, has the beam section, and it goes on the other side. So if you imagine, if you were just to cut off those little stubs here and use this piece, that's the exact shape of this front part. Now, the reason I did that is, this is the 45-degree angle. I talked about this in detail in the last video. These pieces here, this is just a mock-up now, and I took it off because it fell off here, but there's a second piece that goes right here. Those will come, and they will land into this area here. So it's basically a perfect mirror image, just this is turned horizontally as opposed to vertically for the column and beam connections, okay? Hope that's useful. So this piece right here, we recognize this is a little slot for the mortise and tenon link joints. There will be a small stubby column here and another mirrored 45-degree angle surface and a beam that runs across here that will help support these bent pieces of poplar from which the 45-degree curved siding will land. I'm hoping all this makes sense. So this right here is, I guess you would say, a floor beam that goes all the way across. If you guys look down there, you guys can see the corresponding point. So there will be a little beam across here. It won't be very tall. These are just, this is just a spacer. I know it's glued together. It's a long story. This was part of a column that I didn't end up using. So this comes into here. And then this right here is a series. So this other floor beam, I guess you would call it, is 5 pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is notched, and I'll show you where that notch comes into play in a second. But this is just one thick beam that's all laminated or glued together, and it runs all the way across here. So essentially you have 3 beams that run across. 1, 2, and then of course the angled front. And then internally in here, I just stacked 3 of these pieces together and just ran, I have roughly in the middle. So I have 1 piece that goes in here and connects with the beam that runs across here. And then I staggered 2 more out there. And then of course I attached the plywood up from underneath. In this case, I just used construction adhesive and some 18 gauge 1/4 inch round staples, stapled it all together, flipped it over and did this side. Now you do see a seam here. This is going to be the inside portion. In an effort to be a little bit more efficient and save wood, instead of cutting into a full new piece of plywood right here, I had 2 pieces that I was able to cut and make fit. There was a seam right here. A part of it landed on the supports that are internal side to side. And this part was actually not. It was still all pretty rigid, but I just ran it across here. Of course, in this 1.5 inch cavity in here, I used Thinsulate, which is, oh crap, do I not have a piece here handy? Oh, right here, I'm sorry. So this is Thinsulate. This is the insulation that I put in there. So they say that to give it about 1.5 inches, 1 3/4 inches. So this is probably on a little bit of a smaller side of 1.5 inches, but it'll be fine. So this is insulated essentially though. And so this whole thing weighs 28 pounds. So pretty light. Okay, so this is a big one. Later in the video, I'm actually gonna show how we install this. I'll do it all myself. Now over to the camper. As I recall in the last video, you guys saw 3 of these column and beam sections, but since I've added, I guess we'll call them horizontal supports that ran across between the window frame area and each corner. And then originally I was going to run a whole nother column right here, because remember we wanted to evenly space these beams. So all these beams are equally spaced, right? And I was going to run another column there and another column there. But you know, I got thinking about it. This is strong enough, so I just ran the horizontal side pieces and then made my triangular top. So actually, this probably should have referenced this one. As far as the Cabover, see how this has this little stubby section? That front part of the Cabover is probably roughly very equivalent to this. But anyways, back to where I was talking about. And so I just attached these to this, and that's strong enough, especially when the rest of the frame is going to get together. And that helps save a little bit of weight. Now, over to these notched sections here, okay? What I did is, so this is going to be accepted in the front here. So you'll notice that this piece comes up, and this is the exact height that I want the cab over. And that notched piece, when I put it in place, will actually slide right in there, sit on the top of both of these, and it'll be a perfect fit. Now, I've had a lot of questions through the course of all of my camper builds, but particularly as of late, as far as how the Cabover is supported. So, and the point being is, a lot of people, the assumption is, which is the logical one, is that the framing is what's going to hold up the Cabover. I'm going to talk about that in a second, but in my case, it's not. I always support my Cabover. So I created this little jig. It's the exact height of this. So what I'll do is when I slide that modular piece over, it'll tuck into these little notches here and then rest on top of here. And the Cabover will rest on that piece up until the point in time where I get the sidewalls on and the glue sets. At that point, I will remove that and the Cabover will be self-suspended. Okay, so, and I'm trying to rush through this so these videos aren't super long. All right, so I've had a lot of questions asking about, mostly, like I said, how does the Cabover support itself? Because it intuitively seems like it should sag and hang. And my answer, and again, I'm not an engineer, this is just my experience. I encourage everyone to do their own research, but just speaking from my own experiences building these, is what supports that cab over. The framing, of course, has a role, but it's the incredible shear strength offered by whatever the skin material is on the camper. So in this case, it's 1/4-inch plywood, okay? So we're going to use this little triangle here, or I'm sorry, correction, this little rectangle here as just a thought experiment. So for a moment, pretend like the rest of the camper's not here, and you're holding this rectangle in your hand, these 4, 2 columns, 2 horizontal supports. Intuitively, we know that if I grab this corner and that back corner, and then I push both arms together, this thing would collapse onto itself, right? I think we intuitively understand that the natural weak point is going to be that deflection side to side. Some people call that racking, okay? If you think about the cab over, now the reason I'm not using this as an example is because this one has an angle in it, and I don't want to add a complexity. It's still the same principle, but just bear with me on this one. So let's imagine that you were building a perfectly square front cab over, okay? Let's say like it was this size and it was sitting off the front of there. So intuitively, we know gravity is going to want to push this down. Or if this was one that was meant for sleeping, you crawl in there, or if you put a bunch of stuff up there, the weight is going to want to bring it down. And we understand that weight is going to rack, right? It's going to want to twist this box this way. And intuitively, we kind of feel like, okay, it's going to collapse. Now, this is the incredible strength of shear. Imagine I took a piece of plywood, 1/4-inch plywood, doesn't have to be 3/4, doesn't have to be half, just a 1/4-inch plywood, and I attached it over this entire rectangle here, right? Glued and screwed, glued and stapled, whatever it is, it's firmly attached to this rectangle. Now, intuitively think to yourself, that racking strength, I think we get it now, right? We intuitively understand that as if you were to try to rack this, twist this in this direction, it's going to have all of this surface area of that horizontally mounted or that vertically mounted piece of plywood, and it's not going to be able to move. Well, that same principle applies to what makes the cab over strong. That's why I always say it's not the framing that holds up the cab over, though it does to an extent. It is the shear strength provided by the wall. Now, this one is angled and stuff like that, but it's the same principle. And if anything, it's actually perhaps stronger, okay? Now, that's different strengths of different materials working together to pull that into place. So for those, every once in a while I get kind of a bunch of comments and emails all at once about people asking that same question. I hope that's helpful as a thought experiment. And one other thing to think about is I understand that a lot of people are thinking, okay, the cab over also, let's say if it was bolted onto here, let's say if it was this rectangle like we just did for the thought experiment, well, it's going to rip off the side of the camper, right? It would fail here at this connection point. That shear strength still has a role, though, because what I will do is when I put on the skin, I will extend it as far as I can. And for this one, I'll get the vast majority of it. So essentially this skin it's going to cover the outside wall of this camper is going to extend all the way into the cab over. And that is where that shear strength comes in. So guys, send me a comment. I'm trying to speak in common terms and just kind of talk in that way. For those who have asked me about this, let me know if that's helpful. And if it's not, I'll try to explain another way. Let me set my camera up on my tripod, and then you guys will watch in real time as I put this modular cab over floor here into the framing. Okay, so hopefully this works. My fat back will probably be in the way, but here it is. All right, so this only weighs 28 pounds. It's a little awkward to maneuver around, as you guys probably see. But in terms of weight, it's not too bad. So that little support, that works nicely because I can just set that on there and just slide it across carefully. Now remember those, remember those notches I was telling you guys about? That sits it right into place, and that locks in nice and easy, just like that. Now, of course, this is not permanently affixed in the camper. I'll do that a little bit later. Glue, screws, all those kinds of things. But you guys saw how easy that was to just build that in a modular fashion. Now, again, it's not impossible. I'm not saying it's wrong. But if you were to imagine that you were going to build all this framing just kind of directly off the camper frame itself, you can imagine how much more challenging that would be, trying to support it, keep it level. Even something as simple as attaching this the plywood on the bottom here. I've done, like I said, a lot of my campers, I built the frame or the Cabover right out from the camper. That's a super big pain in the butt. But you build it as a modular unit, and you set it up so it just notches right into the camper. And as you guys can see, it's not that big of a deal. And you can kind of see now this is just a mock-up piece, and this is small, but you can kind of see how this will come and land on this end. Of course, I'll have an angled piece of wood across here, so it has a nice strong attachment point. And then the one that would be right here will land right in this area. So you can kind of imagine this Cabover. I know this one's missing, so it's a little hard to imagine it, but it's, you know, the dual plane here, 45-degree angle, and they'll land right into the same matching angle. So it's kind of as though, see this column and beam section, it's kind of as though I just took this and laid it right on its side. Now, right here in this notch, like I talked about, there'll be another little stubby column, 45-degree angle, and a beam that runs across, and this will provide a little bit extra support for this piece going across here. And then you guys can imagine, now this Cabover, you know, there's not an enormous amount of weight to support when this is done, and, you know, nobody's going to be up here sleeping, but you guys can imagine once all of these wall sections are in place, you know, that's that shear strength I'm talking about. But I'll say this, when I get these permanently affixed in here and attached right here, this thing would probably support itself just fine between all the mounting points. So one final thing, and I'll cut this video off. This camper as a whole right now is trending about 20 or 30 pounds lighter than 8.0 did. And if you guys recall, 8.0 came in at 490 pounds. So far, this is looking really good. It's not dramatically lighter than 8.0, but it's a little bit lighter. So it's a little hard to do an apples-to-apples comparison because you know, I weighed stuff at slightly different stages. But the best I could assemble all the weights that I had recorded for 8.0, this thing it's technically 30 pounds lighter, but I'm going to say about 20 to 30 just to give it a little bit of conservatism there. So anyways, guys, thanks for watching. Let me know what you think. And most importantly, for those who had those questions about shear strength and what holds up the Cabover, let me know if my little thought experiment helped. Thanks so much.